This show is not intended for the politically correct or the close-minded. Enter at the risk of opening your eyes. You have been warned.
Why does the media attack an issue? To get primetime ratings?
In my line of work, you got to keep repeating things over and over and over again for the truth to sink in.
The Army Air Forces has announced that a flying disc has been found and is now in the possession of the Army.
A moment comes when we step out from the old to the new, and when the soul of a nation, long suppressed, finds utterance.
To kind of catapult the propaganda.
You are listening to Open Eyes with your host, Ira Robinson. From the normal to the paranormal, from government cover-ups to the depths of our consciousness, we aim to explore all things. From the dawn of prehistory to current events, no topic is forbidden and nothing remains hidden.
No more secrets.
Open your eyes and open your mind to the fact that life as we know it is not as we have been taught. Join us at LateNightInTheMidlands.com or OpenEyesNetwork.com as we take this brief journey through the depths of the cosmos and explore what it really means to be human.
Many peoples have sacrificed their liberties, only to learn to their sorrow that deceit and mockery, poverty and tyranny are their reward.
Whether you're online or offline, intercontinental or intergalactic, hello and welcome to Open Eyes. It is a Friday. We are live and in person with you. And if you want to call in tonight, you can do so. The number is 260-494-3937. Our Skype line is JDA Film. And as always, we're over in the chat room at lnmradionetwork.com. You can also find us broadcasting over there on YouTube and YouTube land as we always are. That's youtube.com/C/Open Eyes Network. Come on over, join in with us in either of those locations. We've always got great chatters going on, lots of great conversations happening. Although over in the LNM Radio Network chat room, it always devolves into food for some reason. I'm not sure why, but it is what it is. And I guess I can get the party started by saying I had some great Chinese food for dinner tonight. It was amazing. We finally got Chinese delivery here in our area. So boy, oh boy, we really made use of it. But anyways, yeah, it's definitely been one of those kind of days. I'm a little stuffed and that's okay. But I had to blow a lot of energy by trying to put a computer together, which is always a challenge when you are blind on top of it. So, it is what it is. Anyways, tonight we have a guest coming on. We have Brittany Armitage coming on. And I'll tell you what, I've been really looking forward to this. She's a really, really cool person, a great author, and I think that you guys are going to really get a great time out of it tonight. So hopefully you all are tuned in, strapped in, and ready for a really cool conversation. Brittany, welcome to the show. We are so glad that you came on with us tonight.
Yeah, thanks for having me. I'm excited to be here.
It is fantastic. I love the work that you do. I love your covers. I love the things that you've got out there. It's really great stuff. It really is. Yeah. Before we get started on any of the book's topics and that sort of thing, I'd like for you to tell the people a little bit about yourself. I've got your bio and I could read it off, but who knows you better than you, right? So why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself?
I'm 29 years old and I have four kids, 3 little boys, and we finally got our little girl. She's about 7 months old now. We live in New Orleans right now. My husband's in the Coast Guard, and we're stationed here for a little bit longer before we get to move again. I have a bachelor's in English, and then I decided that I wanted to take that a little bit further, and I went and got my master's in creative writing and learned to write for the entertainment business, most specifically films and TV, stuff like that. And I have 4 books out right now. We're working on more as I have time because I'm a stay-at-home mom and take care of the kids, and 2 of the kids are at school, and we have a 3-year-old and a 7-month-old at home, so days are pretty busy with them. And
so you get it like maybe 15 minutes a day to write, right?
Yeah, the evenings, late night, and by that time you're just exhausted and you're like, I just want to go to bed.
I know the feeling all too well. So that's cool. You actually went and got a master's in creative writing. That's really awesome. You're actually the first guest that I've had on that's had, a really extensive higher education as far as actually specifically writing is concerned. So I think that's pretty cool. What was that like going to that type of thing?
It was tough. I was kind of worn out from my bachelor's because I took a little bit longer because I started doing part-time instead of full-time because we had kids at home and trying to juggle kids in school. Full-time wasn't really working as well as I wanted to, so it took a little bit longer, and I was like, I'm just done. When I'm done, I'm done. And then I got to the end, I'm like, you know what? I just want to keep going and research schools, and I found Full Sail and was really interested in the entertainment side of things. So I did that, and it was a 1-year, it's a very fast-paced course. So I kind of at first bit off more than I could chew because I started a month before I was due with our 3rd son. So I had to take a little bit of a break, to have a baby and get adjusted to life with 3 kids at that time. But I jumped right back in it, and they do 1 or 2 classes at a time per month. So every month you have a new class. So getting time to sit down and do all that. My husband's actually going to school for digital cinematography at Full Sail. So he goes to work, comes home, he has school and the kids and all. So he knows it was a roller coaster, that's for sure. But when I got done, it was a big accomplishment, and I was happy I did it. And there were times I just wanted to stop and throw my hands up because it was a lot. But
yeah,
I'm glad I did it because nowadays people they say they want the more experience or a higher education or something. So I figured it couldn't hurt to have it under my belt.
Right. Well, I've heard really good things about Full Sail. I've not gone there myself, obviously, but I've heard a lot of people talk really well about Full Sail University. So they were really good then.
Yeah, we like it. It's really fast paced. It's you can do. I think there's some on campus stuff, but my husband's doing their online learning. And he's doing right now 2 classes at a time. And sometimes I don't know how he does it because he goes to work all day and then he comes home and he's got class and he helps me with the kids. But it was good. They've been pretty good. Some things are changing a little bit. So we're having to learn, different things for him versus what they did when I went to school. But they are very hands-on with the entertainment business, movie making and screenwriting, and they do a lot with TV and films and all. So it's a good thing to have kind of in your back pocket, and they have a pretty good career development. I'm always getting stuff from them asking, we have this job, do you want to apply? So it's been pretty good. I don't really have too many complaints as far as Full Sail was concerned, and it allowed me to stay home and raise the kids and keep the kids at home. So I was happy with that. I got my education while still being able to be a stay-at-home mommy, which was important to my husband and I.
Yeah, I can definitely understand that. That is really cool. I never went into doing the higher education stuff myself. I don't, if people want to do that, that's great. I never did it myself. I've kind of taken my writing as life experiences sort of thing. And I guess I've been writing for long enough that, at this point in time, if I was to do something like that, I don't know really what I'd end up getting out of it just because I've been actually writing since I was 8 years old. So
yeah. It was different, like going to school for writing and doing things. I've been writing my entire life too. So having to change that mindset was different, and especially writing for books versus writing for the visual format was very different. And
that's a totally different mindset that goes into everything with that
and
sort of
having
thing.
to learn how to give over some parts of control. In your books, you get to do everything. That's your entire world. And with screenwriting, it's like, okay, you can write one thing, but the director or the set people or wardrobe, they can change all that. And you're okay, well, I have this picture in my head, and the teachers are like, well, you best get that picture out of your head, because that's not how it's going to be if you want to write for TV or movies or something like that.
Yeah. See, I could see where the advantage would be with something along those lines, having, somebody that's been through the business with you, telling you those kind of things, because that's sort of something that you never expect when you walk through the doors in that sort of situation. You're like, whoa, wait a minute. No, I wanted her hair to be blue. Nope, it's brown. Too bad.
Yeah, that doesn't look good on TV, so we're changing it.
Yep. Yep, exactly. Well, okay, so have you actually had anything done as far as the screenwriting thing is concerned? Do you have any works that are out there that you've written with that yet, or?
Not yet. I did for my thesis project, I took the first book in the Light of the Magi series and kind of transformed it into a television pilot episode. That was like the whole year you were learning how to craft and hone and edit that. So I'd like to do something with that eventually. I think it would be fun, and that seems to be a pretty big thing right now, the book to movie or book to TV aspect. But we haven't done anything yet. My husband and I are probably going to partner up and start working on some stuff. I have helped him a little bit on some of his stuff, but he's pretty creative fellow too, so he doesn't need too much of my help. But nothing out there yet. I've been mainly focusing on the book aspect. I kind of feel more comfortable there and don't want to spread myself too thin at this time. But hopefully in the future, that would be awesome to see something of mine in the visual format.
Well, it's interesting that you and your husband have the creative process sort of together. I like that. One of the questions that I had for you was, who tends to be your biggest supporter? Would it be him?
Yeah, him and my parents are my biggest supporters. But without him, without my husband, I wouldn't be able to do anything, because, he's there right now. He's out with the kids right now, so I can do this. Otherwise, you'd have kids crawling all over the place or yelling in the background and needing something. So he's definitely been my biggest supporter. I can't do anything without him. And then my parents have been, kind of pushing me along since I was little, and they've been really good supporters. And I have to say my mom she got me hooked on books at a young age, and I just fell in love with them, and she'd catch me like under the blanket after bedtime reading with a flashlight.
I've been there.
She kind of just inspired that, and I remember reading The Boxcar Children with her. She would read 1 or 2 chapters a night, and I'd steal the book and read ahead. So the next night when she's reading to my brother and sister, I'm like, okay, let's go a little bit faster. I'm ready for the next chapter. And she's like, you can read it by yourself. That's fine, but we're not as fast as you. They're not as fast as you.
That is really cool. It's so helpful to have, especially when you're in a marital situation. It's so important, I think, for an author to have their spouse be like one of their biggest parts of their support system. I've known so many authors, including myself over the years, who have dealt with relationships that, were very against what you were doing. I mean, I had one ex-wife threw all of my writings into a fire because she thought that it'd be better for me to give up on my dreams.
Oh, no.
And then I had another one who, when she left me, stole everything except for the clothes that I was wearing on my back in the car that I drove into work that day, and destroyed it all when she went to wherever. I think she went to Canada. It's like, and I actually gave up writing for a while after those 2 incidents, because you put so much of your heart and soul into writing, into the books and into the characters that you've created, that to have someone just, literally destroy it like that, it's disheartening. It's disempowering, to say the least. So I actually gave it up for almost 10 years. And then I met my wife, Jolene, who has been absolutely 100% everything to me as far as support goes. And my writing has flourished because of it. You know, she convinced me basically to get back into it again because she loved to read what I wrote. So.
Yeah, my husband, he jokes that he's not a big reader. So he hasn't really read any of my stuff, but I've always bounced stuff off him, ideas off of him and talking about it. And he's been the one that when I was talking about publishing, and he's like, well, just do it. Let's do it. And he's always, you know, and looking for ways to invest in my dreams and you know, if I think I need to spend a little extra money on a better cover or something, he's been the first person. He's always the one that's like, okay, we'll do it. And I'm like, I don't know. And he's like, if you think it's going to help you, just do it. So he's been, he's a huge help, and it makes a ton of difference because, you know, it gets to be a little isolating being a stay-at-home mom and just having the kids around all day. So to have that, person in my corner constantly has been a huge help.
I can definitely see how, especially when you have a lot of little ones running around like you do. That definitely would be a big difference. You know, like my wife, you know, she always makes sure that I have enough time in my day that I've, you know, sat down to write. And because she knows if I don't write in every day, you know, at least a little something, I feel like crud. You know, I feel guilty for not doing it. So she always makes sure, you know, did you write today? No? Okay, well, here, sit down and write, you know, and I'll take care of everything. I mean, she's just been really fantastic with it.
Awesome.
So, yep. I love it. It's definitely been a different experience, to say the least. Well, you mentioned as far as publishing goes. Now, let me ask you this. So have you been traditionally published, or do you do self-publishing exclusively?
I do self-publishing exclusively.
Okay.
In the beginning, I kind of sent some stuff off and just kind of got disheartened by rejections. And I have a friend who does a little bit of both, and she told me like it just was harder giving up more control of your baby. And she felt like she kind of had more creativity and more say in the process with the indie publishing. So I kind of stuck with that. I kind of felt like that I don't have to share with anybody else as far as, you know, what I think my book should be and what it should look like and how it should be marketed. I don't have to change anything for anybody else. So I've kind of stuck with the indie publishing world, which it's tough. It's cutthroat sometimes.
It can be. Yeah. I've been both traditionally and indie published, you know, doing the self-publishing. And you know, there's benefits to both. There's cons to both. I kind of like both. You know, I don't necessarily prefer one over the other, but I think that in certain circumstances, self-publishing works better than the traditional publishing route, depending on what you're doing. So, like, as an example, you know, both of us are in the 20 books to 50K group. And I think that doing the really rapid publishing like they recommend doing in that group doesn't work in the traditional publishing world. It's not really something that happens very much over in the traditional publishing, because it's like a lot of times when you publish a book, you know, you're looking at a 1 to 2 year window, generally, you know, for most of the big houses that are out there, between you sending in the manuscript and actually seeing the book in your hand. Now, I've been lucky with the publishers that I've got. They're really, really good about getting the books out quickly, and giving me at least some say over what happens with the books, you know, the covers and all of that kind of stuff. So I'm really happy with the ones that I've gotten. It's sort of like kind of the best of both worlds with them. But, you know, I've got my plans laid out that if with these books that I'm writing really rapidly, I plan on self-publishing them for the e-versions of it. And then they've agreed to do the publishing in print of, like, if I put together, you know, maybe 5 books, then they will put out those 5 books in one anthology, traditionally, as the print versions. So I mean, it's kind of like a hybrid version of it, but I like the way that it's going because I still have enough control over it to let that little egoist inside of me have a little bit of playtime,
Yeah.
So what have you found?
I'm not very fast with my most of mine are spaced out pretty far apart. I have intentions to get them out fast, but then reality sets in.
Life happens.
Yeah, your kids, somebody gets sick, and by the time that free time rolls around, you're just exhausted. And you're like, nothing's getting written today, so it gets pushed off, and I guess I like the freedom that comes with indie publishing. I'm on my schedule. It's nice to not feel so stressed about deadlines and stuff like that. I can kind of do it at my own pace. The marketing aspect is not my friend, but everything else has been going pretty good.
That is really cool. So with the publishing that you've been doing, what are the, like, I think the best way to put it, what is the biggest pitfalls that you've run across with it?
The biggest pitfall, I think it's marketing. It's so hard to figure out, Amazon keeps changing, and then I had my books with Pronoun, the e-versions of it, and you get your niche figured out there, and then they threw a curveball at the indie world, and we're like, okay, we're shutting down. And so I had to kind of scramble to figure out, I had to pull all my books down, the ebooks, and they were who distributed everything to Amazon and iTunes and Barnes & Noble and all, and make the decision, do I go Amazon exclusive and put everything on Kindle Unlimited, just to kind of make it easier on me for now while I figure everything out, or am I shooting myself in the foot and losing readers? Because, some people do like the iTunes, the iBooks and their Nooks and stuff like that. So that the whole marketing thing is my biggest pitfall with the indie stuff. I have to figure out what do I spend my money on, because it all comes out of your pocket as an indie author. And it's not something that I really studied a whole lot in school. We covered it a little bit, but it's been mostly me trying to figure out, what works and what doesn't work by trial and error. And that can get a little expensive sometimes. I'm sure you've seen some on the group that we're in, people running ads or something on Facebook, and it completely not working, and somebody else does something different and it works for them. So that's been a huge problem, figuring out what works and what doesn't work, and what to kind of spend your budget on. Is it worth it to spend more money on your covers, or is it worth it to spend more money on Facebook ads or Amazon ads?
It's such a gamble sometimes, isn't it?
It is. It's a really big gamble, and then something will work for a little while, and then Facebook or Amazon will change something up, and you got to figure it all out again. And we've seen they're going through the kind of growth or something, and Walmart, I guess, is coming out with some new stuff. So it'll be interesting to see how all the marketing changes again with a new avenue to put out, and whether or not it helps or hurts people like us who rely on the independent side of things, and people like us who have to, figure out all that marketing stuff for ourselves.
I think that probably one of the biggest problems is that we're dealing with the public, and sometimes the public can be very flighty in its wants, desires, and needs. So that's one of the pitfalls I've run across. Marketing is probably one of my biggest issues as well. I won't deny I've tried a lot of different ways to get the goodies out there, and sometimes it feels like you're talking into an echo chamber. It really does.
And then trying to figure out what's working. Everybody's like, well, just go do some research and all. And it's like, okay, well, with my romance series, it's not the traditional romance, and right now the big marketing stuff is the covers with like half naked men or something like
Right.
that. Like, that's not me. That's not what I want my books to say. I want somebody to carry my book out in public and not like think they have to hide it or something like that. You know, if that's your thing and that's what sells, that's great, but that's not what I wanted to do. So that was tough. And it might hurt that I don't have half naked people on the front of my book, but I'm starting to see now that that's kind of changing a little bit, watching different, reader groups and all, and people are saying, they're tired of it, and some people are saying they still like it, but just watching the world kind of evolve and seeing what's working right now and what's not working. You definitely have to be on top of things, and you can't be strict with your thinking. You have to be a little bit flexible at least, and I didn't want to kind of give up my values and what I wanted to do, but I also want to be able to, I do want to make money off of it because this is work. It's a hobby right now mainly, but it would be nice to have that extra income and have, some things pay off and be able to rely on that, and be able to say, what I make my money on, what I pay my bills on. I love what I do. So trying to figure out how to balance all that with your vision and your values and what you want is extremely difficult, especially in today's day and age where you make the wrong decision. It's all over social media or something like that. So you can't hide from that. So that's interesting, and it's definitely a learning curve.
Well, you do basically like a combination between contemporary romance and fantasy. You've got like one set of books that is contemporary romance, and then another one that's fantasy, right?
Yes, and the fantasy is geared more towards like teenagers, young adults, and then the contemporary romance is, they call it clean or sweet romance. There's no sex in my romance books. It's all kind of, when we get to that, it's the fade to black type situations. But yeah, and figuring out what works for each one has been kind of a juggle, because you've got two completely different audiences and age groups and stuff, and trying to figure out what's appropriate to say in one book if you're going to expect it to be in schools, and what's going to be okay to say in another book. Has been interesting, and then trying to kind of keep it clean with the romance aspect has been interesting. I have people who are like, "Oh, you would sell more books if you put sex in it," and I'm like, "Well, that's not what I want to do." Like,
right? That's
the whole point of my romance series, was kind of to give readers more clean romances to read, because I noticed that a lot of the books out.
It's like with what I've noticed with it, it's more that it's about the characters and the story, not about the sex, and
exactly.
that's good. That I think that there really needs to be more of that kind of thing.
Yeah, I was reading, I get the BookBub deals every day and going through Amazon and looking for new writers, and I was getting frustrated, and I told my husband, I'm like, I find these really good stories, but it's like I'm flicking through half of them to get through the sex scenes, and I want the story. I want to know about the characters and all, like what happens in the bedroom doesn't really interest me. I want to know that they have chemistry and that they're, they're romance, but what happens behind closed doors isn't my thing. It's, it just got frustrating, and, you can't, it's not like I want to be able to have something out that if my child picks it up and reads it, I'm not going to be freaking out about it. Is that appropriate for them to read? Right.
Exactly. Or have your grandma, read, it's like, I know some authors that totally go, into the erotica zone. And then I know others in the romance, category that are like that, where they're like, if my grandma picked it up and read it, I'd love for her to be able to enjoy the story and not feel embarrassed at reading it.
Yeah, and like I know my parents and my grandparents have read it before, so it's like I don't want to be thinking about that while I'm writing my story. Like, am I, what, what happens in the bedroom between me and my husband. It's somebody thinking about that. And I'm like, no, because I've had people ask me that. And I'm like, nope, that's why I do not put sex in my books. I don't want my parents to be thinking about that. I don't want my grandma to be thinking about that. Like, if that's your thing, awesome, but it's just not mine. And I think we need more romances out there where, like you said, it's more about the characters and the story than the sex.
Right, exactly, because I think when it comes to romance, one thing that people tend to miss in that category a lot is that, romance really is about the mind. It's about because the mind is the biggest erogenous zone that we have. It is what controls and drives all of that stuff. And if it's not, finding the situation fascinating or enjoyable or whatever the case may be, then there's going to be no romance. It comes down to that. So, maybe that's because I look at things a little bit more cerebrally or something along those lines. But I don't know. To me, if I was to read something along those lines, I'd much rather read something where the story is the actual key of things and that, anything else basically is just, it's window dressing essentially.
Yeah, and that was kind of what I was hearing people say when I first came up with the idea for the You and Me series. It was originally supposed to be one book, and I was actually driving to New Orleans. My husband had been gone for a week or two, and I was going to pick him up, and we were going back to Alabama to spend some time with family, and I was thinking about, I think 50 Shades had just come out in theaters. I'm like, we have all this, but I read those books to kind of get an idea of what was going on around me in the entertainment. I try to read what's popular and watch what's popular to try to kind of get an idea of what's going on around me. And I was still in school at that point. And I'm like, I just feel like some of it was unrealistic, and it was 90% of the book I felt like was sex. So I'm like, where's the story? I want to see more of the characters and what made them fall in love with each other. Is it love or is it lust? That's what you're wondering the whole thing,
right?
The whole story. And I want people to read my books and be like, okay, Elliot is madly in love with Ella, and you can tell. And I want them to fall in love with my characters on an emotional level instead of a physical level. And I kind of feel like that's what some of the romance is out there now. It's more of a physical thing than the emotional. I want people to feel sad when something happens to a character,
right,
or be happy when something happens to a character. So maybe I get too invested in how my characters feel and all, because they're. I mean, you thinking about them all the time.
Yes.
And,
oh yeah.
And they're real people to you, so I wanted their stories to be real. And I kind of felt like if you focused on the physical aspect too much, it was all physical and not emotional, and you weren't getting the depth to the characters that I was really wanting.
Well, yeah, exactly. And that's one of the things I do with my own books. I approach my books from a character first sort of situation. The story, yes, is definitely, critically important. But if my characters were to be put into a different story, into a different situation or something like that, it would still be their story.
Yeah.
It's so my stories are definitely always very much character driven, very much emotionally driven, no matter what it is, whether I'm writing in horror or science fiction or fantasy or whatever the case may be. They're always primarily about that character and the changes that they go through from the beginning of the story forward. The situations that they're in are almost, secondary to this person that you're getting to know,
Yeah, I like stories that I can connect with the character and kind of, I can see them in my head and think about encountering them in real life.
I've had people get ticked off at me and write me because I killed off a villain that they were absolutely in love with. Because my villains, a lot of people, when they write their villains very kind of one-dimensionally. Their antagonists are sort of one-dimensional in nature, and there's not really a whole lot of substance to them. But even my villains, I put so much character into them. They're all flawed in some kind of way. Every character in my stories, they're all flawed in some way, and that includes the villains. They're doing the things that they're doing because of X thing that happened to them, and it led them, down this path in life till they've reached, this breaking point or whatever the case may be. There's a reason why it's occurring. And I always try to, focus on what makes them tick, what makes them the way that they are. And I've had people call me out on it. Why did you kill this guy? I really liked him, I mean, just.
And you're doing something right as a writer when someone gets that emotionally attached to one of your characters. And I kind of think that's why Harry Potter was so successful, is because everybody, she poured so much into every character, not just the big characters, the little characters, and like you said, the villains. When you can see the change in the bad guy and what made him or her the way it is, I think it's more relatable, and you can kind of think about things that have happened in your life or how you would react to a situation. And I think that's what makes it so much better, and that's what kind of made me fall in love with reading, was falling in love with the characters first and feeling like them and they're a part of your life. Even like you said, the bad guys. I like that. I like it when you can connect with all the characters and you're almost rooting for the bad guy in certain situations, because there's certain situations where you feel so bad for him and you're like, well, if this didn't happen to him, maybe they wouldn't be bad. Maybe things would be different.
Yeah, I like to make people think, what would it have been like if they never had X thing happen to them? What kind of person would they be, And that's sort of what I try to explore in the books that I write is, what happened to them to make them into who they are, and do they have regrets? Do they ever think about what might have been? And if they do, hell, that goes onto the pages. It's right there. You guys are following right there with the guy as he's thinking, if I hadn't had this happen, maybe I wouldn't be this person that I am today, so on and so forth. I mean, I love doing that. I love engaging the readers as much as possible with everything that goes on. And I think that a lot of authors out there kind of miss that mark. They don't hit that right because they're too busy concentrating on what's going on in the story itself, the spending, endless days world building and so on and so forth, when then they put in the characters that are very one-dimensional and nobody wants to enjoy it that way,
Yeah, and I like it when, I think it takes me a little bit longer to write because I'm so focused on, well, if we do this, is this realistic for this character? Because how is she going to react to the situation? And after my second book, See Me Through, my mom called me and we were talking about it, and she was like, well, what if this happened in the next book? And we were talking about these people like they were real people, and I'm like, well, I don't think he would really like that. And she started talking, and a light bulb kind of went off. I was like, this is a good thing. I like it when people can know my characters and kind of know what makes them tick and help me see them from a different perspective too, and trying to figure out where the story is going to take me from them and how they react. And that's kind of, we did a class at Full Sail. It was for video game writing, and you had to do this chart. If your character makes this decision, what's going to happen? If your character makes this decision, what's going to happen? And then everything kind of flows from there. And you have different outcomes based on these different decisions. So I think that's kind of, I have friends who write that are like, oh, the characters tell me, what's going to happen in the story. And with me, it's like, I kind of know where I want it to go, but especially with the last book, things turned out vastly different than I had originally planned. And I think that's kind of what's going to happen in book 3. I had to take a little break from it because I was just, what I was writing wasn't getting me. I felt disconnected from the characters. And so now I'm like, okay, well, I've just got to kind of step back and think about how the characters are going to react to these new situations and figure out if the end of the story is what I had in my mind to begin with, or if it's something different. Like 90% of the time that ends up happening, things are completely different than what you planned on. So you have to be flexible and learn to listen and know your characters in order to get the story told in the best way possible.
Yep, I don't disagree at all. We do have to hit a break here real quick. When we come back, let's get right back into that. I've got a couple of things that I wanted to ask you about as far as that kind of thing is concerned. How's that sound?
Sounds good.
Awesome. You guys are listening to Open Eyes. My name is Ira Robinson. Tonight we're here with Brittany Armitage and a really great guest, really great lady. I hope that you guys are enjoying it tonight so far as much as I am. If you want to call in, the number is 260-494-3937. Our Skype line is JDA Film. And as always, you can reach us in the chat room at lnmradionetwork.com. We're also live streaming on YouTube at youtube.com/C/Open Eyes Network. Stick around. We'll be back in just a few minutes.
You can listen to the LNM Radio Network 24 hours a day, 7 days a week through the Paranormal Radio app. Available from lnmradionetwork.com or TalkStreamLive.com on both Android and Apple. Our call to listen line is open 24/7. Dial 701-719-9704 so you can listen on the go.
Ben Franklin said, if you do the same thing tomorrow as you did today, you're going to get the same tomorrow as you got today. Changing the world starts with you, and changing you starts with changing the way you think. Late Night in the Midlands can help. Listen to all of our shows at latenightinthemidlands.com because things really do need to change. There are days that the red pill is bitter in my stomach, but I can't get it back out. I think because I have to. I speak because I have no choice. I walk through this dark age we're in with open eyes. Listen to Open Eyes on latenightinthemidlands.com. And together, maybe we won't stumble and fall.
This is your last chance. After this, there is no turning back. You take the blue pill, the story ends. You wake up in your bed and believe whatever you want to believe. You take the red pill, you stay in Wonderland, and I show you how deep the rabbit hole goes. Remember, all I'm offering is the truth, nothing more.
Available now, Troll Spray. Do you have problems with trolls? Do you constantly find yourself turning on the light of truth and find they come out of the woodwork after you? Give your trolls a quick squirt of Troll Spray, and you'll be amazed at how quickly they flee. Troll Spray has been tested on all of the different types of trolls: shills, false prophets, doomsayers, sock puppets, and of course, those ever fearsome hostile radio show hosts. It works on them all. Get Troll Spray today, available only at L&M Radio Network. Spray the trolls away with Troll Spray.
The L&M Radio Network offers a chat room for you, the listener, to connect with others whom are interested in the topics and guests that the L&M Radio Network brings to you. During the live shows, the hosts will even visit the chat room and chat with you, the listener. Click on the big red Chat and Listen button at the top of the website and join us. No subscription is needed at either lnmradionetwork.com or latenightinthemidlands.com.
To hide the truth once you know it makes you think that you are better than everyone else. It makes you into the type of person who says, "Ooh, I have a secret," but you're not ready to hear it yet. However, for $39.95, I'll let you in on the secret. You'll lead the people to the promised land for the cheap price of 3 easy payments of 1/3 of their soul apiece.
Well, hello everybody. Welcome back to Open Eyes. My name is Ira Robinson. Tonight we're here with Brittany Armitage and a really great guest. Loving what she's got to say so far, and hopefully you guys are as well. Let's jump right on back into it. She's going to be with us for another 20 minutes or so, and definitely a really cool conversation so far, Brittany. Thank you so much for coming on tonight.
Yeah, thanks for having me. It's been fun here too.
Awesome. Well, you were mentioning as far as sort of planning and being flexible and that sort of thing before we hit the break there. And one of the things I wanted to ask you about is, do you feel like you're more of a pantser or an outliner, or do you sort of do a hybrid between?
I think I'm more of a hybrid. I used to just fly by the seat of my pants, and it took me, I think 12 years to write my first book. So that obviously wasn't working for me. So I kind of flesh out the very, very basics of where I think my story is going to go, and kind of watch it evolve from there, and listen to what my characters are telling me in my head. But it's kind of interesting that they take control 90% of the time. And like I said before the break, what I might have planned out in the beginning usually doesn't turn out how I want it to in the end. Hold Me Still was originally supposed to be one book, and it's turned into 3. And then I got done with See Me Through, and now I'm like, okay, well, I think my other characters need stories in that book, so I'm fleshing out just very, very basic ideas for the different characters in my books and their stories and their love stories. So it's been kind of fun to see that develop. But yeah,
really
definitely
cool.
not one of those hardcore outliners. I couldn't do that.
I used to do pantsing and kind of failed quite often. I switched over to outlining, doing what you're doing, as far as just sort of doing the beats of the story and that sort of thing. And really, enjoyed doing it that way. The past couple of books, unfortunately, I have really gone overboard on the outlining. I mean, my last book that ended up being let me see, it was 80,000 words, I think is what the final total was. I did like a 17,000 word outline on. I mean, it was it was crazy how much I pumped into that outline. And then the one I'm writing right now, which is probably going to end up being about 90 or 95,000 words, has a 12,000 word outline. I mean, it's just, I went way too overboard, and I don't like doing that because, then it's like if you write way too much in your outline, a lot of times you feel like your creative juice has already kind of, gone into the story and, there's nothing left, but
I kind of feel like if I put too much into outlining, I almost feel like I'm putting myself in a box sometimes. Mm-hmm. and that, it took me a while. I had originally planned to get See Me Through done before our daughter was born, and I would write the ending and I'm like, I hate it. I deleted it like 3 or 4 times and went back and had a notebook and wrote down, okay, well, this has happened in my outline and I'm trying to get to this point and my characters are just not getting me to that point. And I realized, like, just one night I looked at my husband and was like, I'm just going to write and see what happens. And I have a couple writer friends who are like, just sprint with me. We'll sprint for an hour. Let's see who can write the most in an hour. And I was thinking about something that one of my professors taught me during my master's class. And they're like, writer's block is a real thing. And most of the time it's because of your own doing. You're overthinking something.
Right.
And so he said, just write. It doesn't matter if it's going to stay in your work or not. Just find a scene and just start writing and see what where your characters take you. And a lot of that I ended up deleting, but it kind of broke me out of that thing. And I'm like, okay, I need to scrap what I had and just go with it and figure out if this is where the characters are going to take me. And that's what ended up getting the end of that book written. Is I wrote it and I was like, okay, now I got to go back and, fill in the fine details and whatever. But when you read it and you're like, this is what it needs to happen. And you realize the whole time, 3 or 4 months worth of frustration in writing was all because I had put myself in this one little box of what I thought my characters needed to go through. And that wasn't what they needed to go through. So I'm trying to be more flexible with the next book and get it written. and try to finish the Magi series. I put that one on hold because I wrote a good 20 or 30,000 words and just I hit delete. I was like, this is not where my characters need to go. So yeah, I try not to outline too much because I don't want to shoot myself in the foot in the long run and waste months. And I think that's what I like about using Scrivener now is I can put I was using Word for the longest time, and once you hit delete, it's gone.
It's gone. Yeah.
So I have folders in my Scrivener file, and with the third book, I've probably got 60,000 words written, and only 20,000 I'm gonna end up using because things have changed so much in my mind and where my characters are going, and trying to get it laid out for the spin-off for the next set of characters in this little world. But yeah, I think my outlines for the next couple books are about this big and in a Word document, and just very, very basic. And I've talked to my mom a little bit about it and thrown ideas at some other people that have read the books. My friend Brandy, I'm constantly texting her, if this happened, what would you think should happen? And she'll text me ideas and throwing things off my mom. She was asking me about one of the characters in my book, if she was going to get together with one of the other guys, and we're sitting there having this conversation, having this in-depth conversation, and I was laughing, so I was like, this is funny, you're having this real conversation as if these are real people, and they're not.
They're real.
They're real to us, but I just kind of laughed. And, I had this full conversation with my mom, and she's like, okay, you have to tell me what happened. Like, I can't tell you because I'll tell you one thing and then something totally different will happen and change that outline completely. So, yeah, I think I would cry if I wrote 12, huge outlines and ended up having to steer clear of them completely.
I definitely understand that all too well. One thing that I think is important is that authors let themselves be flexible in some kind of ways, even if you do outline, really heavily. Yes, you can kind of box yourself in a little bit, but I think that if you kind of give yourself a few escape clauses somewhere here and there, it helps. It's like I wrote one book, Voices Carry, which is due to be published here pretty soon. It's the sequel to one of my other stories. And in that book, I have my antagonist named Sala, who, I planned out to be a certain way. She was going to have, a certain personality, different types of things happen to her in her life, so on and so forth. But then as I started writing the story, I realized, and this is going to sound strange to those that are not authors, but I realized that there was a whole nother character that was with her that she wanted to bring along. And there was an entire part of her backstory. And if I didn't write this character in, it would have totally changed the way that the story went. And I think it would have been a worse story because of it. It would not have been as deep, as fascinating as it ended up being, at least for me, when I wrote it. So there's something definitely to be said for allowing yourself enough flexibility for that kind of thing to happen, when you're doing your outlines. So that's kind of why I think I'm a little bit angry at myself for doing the really heavy duty outlining that I have in the past couple of books. Because, when I write, I do a kind of a stream of consciousness thing. I just kind of disconnect, listen to my music, and my fingers just go to work, But when I'm doing this really heavy outline kind of thing, I break myself from that because I want to check, am I following what my outline's saying? That kind of thing. And I'm really, I'm kind of disempowering myself, I think, a little bit with it.
Yeah, and I like to keep notes. So that's kind of why I've invested more into like Scrivener and stuff like that. I can put little note cards instead of trying to keep a million note cards, because I probably had like 10 notebooks running around from over the years of 3 books or ideas for books and one, and then I lose it and it's somewhere else. Mm-hmm. and like you were talking about your character having somebody else come along, that's kind of how Hold Me Still ended. I realized that there was a character that had been that was in the book as just kind of a minor character, and realized that she, like you said, with your other character, was a major part of her, and it actually drove what happens in books 2 and 3 with Ella and Elliot and their story. And I'm now realizing that character actually has a lot to do with a lot of the other characters. What happens to her really pushes what they end up doing further along the line. So it's interesting how these characters pop up and how somebody minor in your story becomes this huge part.
Yeah, absolutely.
Drives your main character.
Yep, exactly. I love Scrivener too, by the way. I definitely endorse Scrivener in every kind of way. It's been a fantastic piece of software to use.
Oh yeah, it's been a lifesaver, because I used to have a folder with 100 different Word documents, and now it's all in one. It's a learning curve, and I almost gave up on it at first, but then when I figured out how to use it, I was like, oh my gosh, it's all in one file, and I can bounce between, if I forget what a character looks like, I've got my character descriptions, and keep everything consistent, and I'm not spending quite as much time in the end going over everything and making sure everything's kind of streamlined throughout the different books, and make sure my character didn't develop orange hair instead of blonde hair or something like that, because I've done that before.
Been there, yes.
You're going through the edits and you're trying to make sure everything's uniform, and I'm like, I don't think the character is supposed to look like that. And I actually had somebody who was beta reading see me through. She was like, yeah, what does this character look like? I can't remember. And I told her one thing, and then I went back and looked, and I'm like, nope, I need to go back and fix that. They don't look like that. Yeah, it's been nice to have everything in one place, and like you can do different ideas, and I can put it in another folder, because I'll write scenes and decide that that's not what I want, and then go back and use pieces from 5 or 6 different scenes to piece together the scene that ends up being in the book. So it's nice to kind of pull from different areas instead of searching through all these Word documents, or writing them in notebooks and having to figure out which notebook it is.
I hated. I'm glad that I moved away from doing the notebook thing, because I've had two notebooks completely disappear. I had one of them had a complete outline for a story, like 100%. The whole story was ready to go, and it disappeared.
Oh my goodness.
I was so sad and disappointed at that, to say the least. There's another piece of software I use. I don't know if you've checked it out or not, but it's called the Novel Factory. Have you looked into that one?
Nope, I haven't. I'll have to look into that one.
Maybe check it out. The way that they've got it set up, it kind of actually works in conjunction with Scrivener, but the way that they do the character setup and the location setup and that kind of thing, it's much more in depth than what Scrivener does. But like I said, it kind of works hand in hand with it. I definitely check it out if you're into doing that kind of thing.
I'm into anything that'll make my life a little bit easier.
Yeah. Same here. Being a blind person, I have to make myself, as comfortable with everything as I can, because I've already got that challenge level that's there, So,
yeah.
So yeah. Okay. Well, a couple of questions in. I know you're going to take off here really soon. You've got your little ones to run after. But one question that I had come in from the chat. Let me get it for you here. Okay. So what's the hardest thing that you've ever had to write? Have you written something that's really hurt you, in the stories?
Actually, yeah, there's 2 things. One, in my fantasy series, I had to kill a character off. And it took me a long time to decide that this person had to go, and in order to push the main character through. And I cried when I wrote it, because I'm like, I had this idea what it was going to be like in the end, and then killing her off was it was soul crushing on some levels, because she was such an important part of the story. And then in Ella and Elliot's story in Hold Me Still, towards the end, she goes through a really, really difficult situation, and I'm not a violent person, but I had to go there. You know, what happens to her has to be kind of brutal in a way. So, and I know a lot of my beta readers said that they had a difficult time reading it, but they understood, like, she needs to go through this, and Elliot has to go through it on a level with her for the next book to kind of make sense. I didn't want it to be, I kind of felt like some things happened to the character at the end, and they're traumatized, but it's what they went through wasn't deep enough or hurtful enough, I guess, for them to be as affected as they were in subsequent books, if that makes sense. Like, what she had to go through was not as physical and emotional, and it really drives the story in book 2. So that was difficult to write, because like I said, I'm not real into the violent shows, or I'm an emotional person, and having to write that about her, it was difficult. And I wrestled with whether or not it was too bad or too violent for what I was writing. But yeah, that one was difficult, and I know some readers said they had a little bit of trouble, but they understood why in the end.
I can definitely understand that. There's been a few scenes like that I've written over the years that definitely, you know, it's like, you know, one of the purposes of writing for me is sort of an act of catharsis. Mm-hmm. I've been through a lot of different things in my life, so a lot of times in my stories, I tap into that emotional content that I went through to try to describe, you know, what's happening to the characters. So there's been a lot of times where I've kind of had to sit back away from my keyboard and let a couple of tears come out, because, you know, it can be hard, you know, or you know, get angry for a little bit and just let it be there for a little bit until I can, you know, wash it away. Okay, it was a different person. I'm not the same person anymore, you know, so on and so forth, doing my things to get through it. But yeah, there's been quite a few times that I've had to, you know, deal with that kind of thing too. It's hard, you know, as an author, when you're tapping into that kind of, you know, base instinct kind of stuff, you know, or that base emotion stuff. It really is difficult sometimes. It makes me realize why some people think that authors are sitting in a room alone with a bottle of whiskey and a pack of cigarettes with them, you know, and they're just nothing but angst.
You feel like you need it to get through. And I know, like you said, you kind of use it as a way to cope with life. And there's what I'm writing in the next book. It's hard because we went through it. I won't say too much without giving it away, but it was my way of kind of like sharing our experiences with other people that end up going through this thing in life. So I kind of knew how I wanted to share it, but it's rough because you're reliving that stuff all over again. But I think it's worth it in the end, because I've had people with some of my other writings. I used to blog, and I blogged a lot for What to Expect while I was pregnant with my son, and you know, we had a miscarriage before him, and I realized that it's such a taboo topic, and it shouldn't be. So I use writing, and I talk about it a lot, and some people think it's weird, and I'm like, no, but I have people that are messaging me saying, you know, I felt so alone, and then reading your stuff, I realized that I'm not alone. And I think that's the most rewarding aspect as a writer, to have somebody say, you know, you helped me, or you've inspired me, or something like that. And I think that's what makes the getting so involved with your work, or putting so much of yourself into your work, worth it in the end.
Absolutely agree, 100%. I love what you have to say there. Let's okay, I know we need to hit a break here really soon, and you're gonna go ahead and abandon us. but where can people find your goodies? Where are you out there?
My books are all on Amazon right now. and where I got rid of my website. It was just too hard to keep up. So you can keep up with me on Facebook, facebook.com/Brittany Armitage. I'm on Twitter at Brit_Armitage. My name was too long to fit into a Twitter name. I have a link to a reader group I'm a little more active in. It's a little bit smaller and a little more personable. And I tend to share goodies a little bit earlier in that now. But Facebook is like my main thing. It's on my phone, so I can message people and talk to people on the go or one-handed while I'm dealing with a child. So yeah, mainly Facebook. If somebody wanted to connect. And then right now all my books are on Kindle Unlimited. The romance You and Me series is on there. We're getting ready to transition the Light of the Magi series over to Kindle Unlimited. We're still a little behind from the pronoun shutdown, getting all that moved over, but it will be on there hopefully sometime next week. And then paperbacks are on Amazon as well. I know there's people who like the physical copies.
Oh yeah, definitely. Awesome. Well, we'll make sure to have everything of yours linked up on the archive of this show, both on YouTube and on our website. So all of you guys out there can either find her through that or through, clicking on our links there. Okay, so every time I have a guest on my show, I always have to let them go by asking a weird question. And the question I have is, if this is the last thing that anybody ever hears from Brittany, what would you want your last message to the world to be?
Oh my, that's deep. I think my last message would be to love each other, and I try really hard. It's hard sometimes, especially in today's day and age, to be positive and leave somebody with some good thought. So just find some way to make somebody else's day a little bit brighter. I told my boys the other morning, smile at somebody. If somebody's being mean to you, smile back. You never know who you might affect in a positive way. And that's kind of what I hope I'm doing with my writing is making some kind of positive difference. And maybe it helps somebody else out and gets them through life. And just want people to remember the good stuff and not the bad stuff.
I love it. That's a great one to do. I've always said that if you're in a gas station and you see someone standing in front of you, give them a smile, because you never know what kind of things they've gone through. That one smile might be the one thing that they needed to get through everything. They might have planned on going home and ending it all that night, but that smile that you give them, you never know, might have said, maybe life isn't so bad. There are people that are out there that aren't bad.
It doesn't cost you anything to be nice. It's hard sometimes. We live in New Orleans, and we're constantly dealing with people cutting you off something in front of you in line. It's like, okay, you know what? Just if this is the worst thing that happens to me today, we're doing good. And it's hard to remember that, but you just got to remember it's little things. And so just try to be positive, because maybe that person's grumpy and cutting you in line because something bad, like you said, something bad happened at home, and they're going through a rough time.
You just never know. Brittany, thank you so much for coming on tonight. This has been great. I hope that you've enjoyed it as much as I have. I'd love to have you come back on again anytime you want.
Yeah, I'd love to. This has been fun. Thank you so much for having me.
Awesome. I'll make sure to send you the links for the archives of the show here as well, so that you can share them out to the world.
Yeah, I will. Thank you. It's been great.
Great. Thank you so much for coming on. We will talk to you again soon.
Thanks. Bye.
Bye-bye. So there you guys go, Brittany Armitage, and you can find her linked up on our website. Make sure you guys head on over to OpenEyesNetwork.com, or as I said before, YouTube.com/C/OpenEyesNetwork to get the links for where she's at and pick up her books. She's got some really great books out there. I love the cover work. I love her attitude and just everything. It's always so much of a pleasure for me to talk to someone like her that just has so much of a feel for life and for the good things. And I wish her the best of luck. So we will go ahead and take a break here. And when we come back, I'm going to shift gears a little bit. I'm going to do something I've done before a little bit, but we're gonna do a little bit of audio files for you guys and let you guys listen to a couple of stories that I've written. How's that sound? Yeah, it sounds pretty good, right? Anyway, so if you want to call in, 260-494-3937 is the call-in number. Otherwise, we will see you on the other side. Stick around, and yeah, we'll be right back.
You can listen to the LNM Radio Network 24 hours a day, 7 days a week through the Paranormal Radio app. Available from lnmradionetwork.com or TalkStreamLive.com on both Android and Apple. Our call to listen line is open 24/7. Dial 701-719-9704 so you can listen on the go.
Why subscribe to Late Night in the Midlands, you ask? Well, I'll tell you why. Late Night in the Midlands covers everything, and through the thousands of expert guests who have joined Michael Vera on his show, come pieces of the big puzzle, which started many years ago. Michael and his guests reveal information dating back to the beginning of time. To this very moment, Michael Vera not only brings you the best guests with the best information, but Michael is not afraid to call out those who are less than honest. You see, in this day and age, we need a radio show we can count on and a radio host we can trust to expose the truth one show at a time. So become a late nighter and subscribe now. Talk radio like no other. Late Night in the Midlands, bringing the truth back to talk radio.
From the author of Silent Steps and Haunted, Finding an Explanation for the Unknown, comes a story so chilling it will haunt you for years to come. Krista is a young woman escaping her past, running away from her family, her traumas, and her God, hoping to find a new life in a different town. But when she is forced to make a horrible choice, she comes to realize malevolent entities have controlled the true darkness she has been a part of. That is when her real terror begins. Penitence is disturbing and evocative. It will tear down the walls between what is real and what is nightmare. Penitence is the new novel by the man called the new master of speculative fiction, Ira Robinson. Find it and all of his books at his website, originalworlds.com. Newly released into paperback and ebook format, Illusions and Dreams, The Ultimate Collection is an anthology of short stories and novellas from author Ira Robinson. Dark desires, tragic decisions, and amazing journeys. Shadows lurk out of the corner of your eye. Burning questions and bending realities force their way into your mind. All this and more will become part of your illusions and dreams. This is the ultimate collection of short stories by best-selling author Ira Robinson. In this book, you'll find new places, new faces, and be taken on a journey through amazing illusions and dreams. Find Illusions and Dreams, The Ultimate Collection, at every major bookseller including Amazon and Barnes & Noble, as well as his website, originalworlds.com. That's originalworlds.com.
They went into the homes now, the powers that be, and told us that you cannot discipline your children anymore. And if you discipline your children, you were going to jail. Then they went into the public schools and took discipline out of there. So when we acted up in there, they put our boys into something called special ed classes. And as you know, those special ed classes are nothing but holding cells until they can go to the state prison. If we can have them convicted for a felony, then once they get out of prison, they cannot get a job because of that. And then if they happen to eke out and find a job, Then they have to pay taxes on a job, yet they cannot vote. I call that taxation without representation. They did a grand thing when they took that discipline away from us, because when they made our parents afraid to discipline the children, then what happened? We found out that the teachers were afraid of the principals were scared of the superintendents was scared of the school board was scared of the parents were scared of the children, and the children ain't scared of nobody.
Hello, everybody. Welcome back to Open Eyes. My name is Ira Robinson. Hopefully, you guys are enjoying the show so far tonight. I know I definitely am. And if you guys want to call in, 260-494-3937 is the call-in number. Skype line is JDA Film. And as always, we're over in the chat room at LNMRadioNetwork.com. Hi, guys out there. And don't forget also YouTube.com/C/Open Eyes Network. You know, I've been doing a lot of video gaming over there on the YouTube channel here of late, and it seems like everybody is responding to it really well. I'll probably be doing it again tonight later on, but we shall see. I'm not sure yet. We'll see what ends up happening. My voice might get a little bit worn out here from doing the show tonight, but we shall see. I also ate some really good food, so I'm really full, and yeah, it's kind of throwing me off tonight a little bit. But anyways, so you know, we had Brittany on tonight, and I'll tell you what, I love doing authors on this show. I love having authors come on and discuss their works, their life, you know, what goes through their thinking process when they're doing the writing. It's always very fascinating to me as an author, you know, and I love to try to give back to that community as much as I can, because, you know, it's such a major part of my life. And I'm trying to, you know, I guess expose all of you guys to things that, you know, you might not normally think about. You might not normally, you know, wonder about and that sort of thing. So, yeah, that's sort of the reason why I like to do shows like this, where I get to come on here and just talk shop for a little while. It's a lot of fun for me, you know, it really is. But anyways, you know, I've done this on the show a couple of times. I've played a couple of these on the show a couple of times, and I know that for those of you guys that are frequent listeners, you might have heard one or two of these things. But I have created short audio files out of some of the stories that I've written, you know, some of the short stories and flash fiction and that kind of thing that I've written. And I thought that I would go ahead and entertain you guys for a little while here with some of my thoughts and that kind of thing with these audio files. So let me cue one up here for you guys and see what you think of it. The story in particular here that I'm going to play is called Vengeance is Hers. And you know, it was one of those stories that sort of came out of nowhere. I was tired one night and I thought, you know, I feel the need to write, but I didn't know exactly what to write. So I wrote the first sentence of the story And it's like everything else completely snowballed from there. And I ended up writing the whole thing within about an hour. I mean, it was really one of those rapid type of events that ends up occurring sometimes when you're a writer. But anyways, so I thought that I would go ahead and play that here for you tonight and see what you think. So again, this story is Vengeance is Hers, and I hope that you enjoy it. Vengeance is Hers by Ira Robinson. The rage built up in Sarah once more, drowning out all but the man before her. The small, darkly lit cafe, the people having their little talks with each other, the baby hollering for more food, all of these things disappeared, vaporized in an instant when she saw him walk through the door. How many times had she thought, since she was a young girl, about the day she would see him again? How many times had the nightmare of her existence been interrupted solely by the thought that one day she would be able to see him again and crush him under the weight of her justice? Too many. It had become almost an obsession. People told her time and time again she should let him go. She should release her anger and let it turn to calm. She should just forgive and forget. But how could she ever do such a thing? This man, the one standing mere feet from her, had done more harm to her than any dozen people could have. He must pay. He must face the fire. Sarah will be the one to light it. He was at the counter, talking to a girl dressed in black, the standard uniform of the cafe workers. He stood with a smug expression on his face as he placed his order for coffee to go. Sarah was already gathering her things together and placing them in her purse, readying herself to go when he did. As he waited for his order, he turned and looked in her direction. Sarah did not look away, would not look away. She willed him to stare into her eyes and see the rage which had become her existence. His gaze passed over her like a wave without taking note of her. It was as if he didn't even recognize her, but how could that be? How could he have forgotten what he had done to her, even if it had been a long time ago? He would soon be unable to ignore her. She'd make sure of it. His order finally arrived and he paid for it, giving the girl a smile. This enraged Sarah even more. How could the woman not see this monster for what he really was? How could she even stomach being as close to him as she was? Had he cast some sort of spell on her? Had he hypnotized her, putting her mind at ease somehow? No matter. Sarah would make sure this woman would be protected from this creature. He walked out of the doorway, heading to the street, and Sarah jumped up to follow. She hurried through the exit and glanced around, looking for the direction the man went. She saw him 20 paces away, walking down the sidewalk. The cool breeze, wending its way through the buildings surrounding them, played with his hair, tussling it every which way. She kept a distance from him, walking at the same rate he was, a shadow following behind in his wake. She would wait for the perfect moment, and until then she would remain unseen. She could see him casually sipping from his cup as he walked slowly along the city streets. He didn't seem to have a destination in mind. He was merely walking for the sake of itself. Though the rage within her bit at her consciousness, trying to break free from her control as a raging beast slavering for a piece of meat, she held it in check. There would be time for that, but only at her choosing. She had waited too long for any impatience to ruin her chance at the perfect strike. Finally, he turned and rounded a corner out of her sight into an alleyway. It happened suddenly, and she was not quite prepared for it. She hurried her own steps to catch up, not wanting to lose her target now that she was so close to having that one moment in her life she had ever looked forward to come to fruition. As she turned the corner herself, she heard a voice say, "I bet you didn't think I knew you were there, didn't you?" His voice, deep and familiar to her as her own breath, echoed through the alley, coming into her ears with a sick, twisted tonality. She said nothing back, looking for where he would no doubt be in wait for her. Her purse slid from her shoulder, landing on the ground with a soft clatter as random items from within scattered around. She paid no attention to that. The only thing she could focus on was him, the dark form of her nightmares, standing just a few yards away. He leaned against a wall, mostly in shadow, but she could see him as clear as if he was in the bright sunlight. He might have been handsome if Sarah did not know his true nature. His smile, charming to be sure, was more of a snarl to this girl he had harmed. The sight of him leaning casually there against the wall caused her rage to finally break free, to run rampant throughout her entire being. She ran forward, arms outstretched, slamming into him with her full weight, and as she crashed into him, her fingers wrapped around his throat, pressing inward. She felt the bones there crack a little beneath her flesh and saw the shock in his eyes as the air was huffed out of him. The breath smelled slightly of coffee he had been drinking, and something else as well, a sickness. Hospital room and nursing homes, dark death and despair all washing over her face as he heaved and bucked for another breath. She turned her head slightly, taking in a breath of her own, then holding it again while her fingers clenched even tighter. Her teeth ground in her mouth, forcing a surge of adrenaline to spring from her guts, pushing her even harder. Sarah was slightly surprised by the confused look on the man's face as the life slowly ebbed from him. She imagined, though, the gurgle coming from his throat was going to be yet another taunt, just like he had done so long ago. The way he would laugh as he spat one vile insult after another etched into her memory, burned there, just as strongly as the brand he used on her back, marking her as his territory. She hoped the scar would stop aching now that she was twisting life from his despicable veins. He slumped slowly to the ground with her hands still clawed into his throat. Her weight helped push him further into the abyss she knew he would soon find himself in. She hoped the hell he woke up to in the afterlife was an appropriate one for him. If she was doomed to enter into those pits herself for taking her revenge on him, so much the better. She would rail at Satan himself to stoke the flame higher on them both, just so she could see him suffer more. She smiled at that thought as his eyes rolled into the back of his head and the lids slowly fluttered. It'd be over in a moment, she knew, and then she could finally move on with her life. The embers of her rage subsided somewhat as the life washed from his face. She could not help seeing him as almost angelic, even if he was a fallen one. Was that perhaps a small hint of relief on his lips? Regret in his cheeks? No matter. The moment of her vengeance had come at last, and the gratitude in her heart made her sore. The cartilage in his throat shifted slightly as her fingers released their grip. A small bit of air still trapped in his lungs escaped through his slightly open mouth. Was blood mixed with the other fluids? Was his last moment held in her hands as torment filled for him as he had put her through? Now she stood and stepped back slightly, staring at his lifeless body laying in the alley. She kicked his leg with her foot, then turned away from him and walked back to the opening to the street. She was quick as she picked up everything which had fallen from her purse and walked away from her vengeance, glad to have it all finally come to an end. Never again would he harm someone else. Never again would his eyes shine as he tortured his victims. She knew through her own act of revenge she had saved others. While she didn't do it for them, she still understood that fact and was glad for it. As she walked the streets away from her past, she knew it was all finally blessedly over. Sarah stepped into a small shop on the corner, sitting down at a table with her purse beside her. The small, darkly lit cafe vanished around her, the people at the tables having their little talks vaporized in an instant when she saw him walk through the door. Rage filled Sarah, wiping away everything else from around her as she stared at the man who had hurt her so long ago. Vengeance would be hers. He must pay. He must face the fire. And Sarah would be the one to light it. So there you guys go. Vengeance is hers. I think that's one of my favorite little short stories that I've done. It's a very twisted little tale. My daughter tells me that I'm kind of sicko for writing stories like that, and that I'm very strange and all of that kind of great stuff. And I don't mind that. I don't mind that at all. She's always accusatory of me killing off characters and being sort of a serial killer in disguise, I guess is what it comes down to. But anyway, so hopefully you guys enjoyed that one. I do have another one here that's lined up for you. It's called Bad Day in Center. This one is one that I've thought quite frequently about expanding into a much larger story. When it comes to like the stories that I'm currently writing, I'm doing ones that are in a series called the Black Rose Files. And with the Black Rose Files, there's sort of a central hub location of where all of the stories take place. So each story has a different main character as the focus, but the sort of main character of the story really is the town itself. And, with Bad Day in Center, I have often thought that the town of Center would be kind of an interesting one to play around with as far as a fantasy stories series is concerned. I may do that someday. I don't know. It's definitely been in my head for a while, but we shall see what ends up happening as the pike comes down. Anyway, so here you guys go. Bad Day in Center. Again, this is a short one. I'm very proud of how it came out, though, and hopefully you guys will enjoy it.
Awesome Stories by Ira Robinson.
Bad Day in Center by Ira Robinson. I thought it would all be so simple. Just walk in, show a little steel, and walk out with everything I could ever want in hand. Of course, my bad luck just wouldn't let that happen now, would it? The day started out with a beautiful sky. The purples were striking as they mixed with the yellow of the sun, just peeking over the horizon line. The clouds were puffed, but not from rain. It would be just enough if it kept up to give some shade from the warm sun later in the day. I knew the market would be a busy one this day, and I was right. As the morning started to take full effect, the people from the countryside started to pour in. You could find most anything in the city market. The place was famous for attracting the exotic. Want freshly preserved meats? They've got that. Spices? Well, more smells came from the market from the spices than from the livestock. There would almost always be a guy selling dragon scales and mystic pearls, even if that's what you were really looking for. The city is named Center for good reason. No other market in the world compares to the one here. It's really what brought me to Center to begin with. Where there's a place like this with the flow of money like water over falls, there's always going to be people like me. I was meeting Janos at this little place on the west side of the market area. It's usually darker in there compared to the other eateries, and the owner doesn't bother the patrons, other than to take the orders. It makes for a good place to make a few plans and split a few deals. Janos said he knew of just such a deal we could get involved with, but wouldn't tell me anything till we could meet at the Parsons place. This wasn't unusual. Most of the time, Janos is one of those loose kind of guys. One he can get along with, but as for relying on their intelligence to get through a jam, you're better off asking for a goat. Still, he had come through in the past for me, and I've made a fair bit of coin in my time working with him. I figured this job would be much the same. Parsons' shop was a little hot, more so than I liked, and Janos wasn't there at the time he told me to meet, but I hung out for a little while longer anyhow. I thought he might have gotten pinched, but just as I was ready to make my exit, he walked through the door. "About time," I said, sitting back down at the table. "Where you been?" Well, he sat as well, putting his sword beside him. The scabbard was dirty as ever, but I knew from working with him in the past the blade itself was spotless. "Had to make sure everything was set," he said, nodding to Parston, who held out his hands across the room in acknowledgement. Janos wanted his usual drink. "So what are we looking at?" I asked. I hated to think that I'd wasted my whole day and wanted to get all of this over with. The dust from the street outside was getting to me a little bit more than I would have liked, but He said, we're looking at a lot of money. What else would I have wanted you for? I said my charming ways with the opposite sex, and he rolled his eyes. I wasn't offended. It was a common banter between the two of us. The whole thing really did seem simple enough. Just a small building, barely guarded most of the time because of its location. It had easy access to streets we could get away on, and if necessary go above, since it was in a cluster of buildings packed close together. I liked the odds, and I told Janice I was in. I should have stayed in bed. Then again, I relied on Janice's intelligence to get us by. I should have known better. I should have checked it all out for myself after holding off for a day or two. Isn't that how it always goes, though? So there I was, standing beside Janice in the middle of one of the money exchanges in Center with my reliable short sword in my hand, and he going into a rage with his long sword of his own, while 24 guards, hidden in the back playing cards or something, pointed their crossbows in our direction. I thought it would all be so simple. My bad luck just wouldn't let that happen. So, here I am, laying in a pool of my own blood, looking at the feathers of the crossbow bolt sticking out from my chest. I know I should have just said no to it all, just gone to my little hovel. Goddess, am I gonna miss that stupid place. Maybe find a nice little someone to waste away the heat of the day with. I've always hated this place, but that's just how things sometimes go in Center. A bad draw from the cards of the fates will get you, no matter how lucky you think you are. If the goddess allows me to come back again, I'm going to ask to be a cat. At least then I'll know better than to trust a person like Janice. For more stories from Ira Robinson, go to his official website, originalworlds.com. At that website, you'll find free stories, free chapters from his books, writing information for those up-and-coming authors, and much, much more. That's originalworlds.com. Thank you for listening. So there you guys go. Bad Day in Center. I really like how that one came out. It's one of those ones that's a little bit weird, but you know, hey, it is what it is, right? That is sort of my forte, is being a little weird, right? So yeah, anyways, I really liked how that one came out. It's a bizarre one. It's again, I've been thinking maybe doing a larger version of it. I don't know. Maybe we'll see. I don't know. Anyways, so here you guys go with His Eyes. It's going to be an interesting one, I think. By Ira Robinson. The car idled away quietly as she sat, waiting for the man to come. The parking lot was empty for the most part, though she could see a couple sitting in a car nearby, talking with one another. To calm her nerves, she imagined what they could be talking about to each other. Maybe they were arguing about bills, or the way he was smoking his cigarettes without opening the windows. She had not seen the woman light one of her own, though she had been watching them for more than 15 minutes. A twinge of anxiety shot through her belly again as the thought of what she was there to do came floating back into her mind. She had never done anything like this before, never would have even imagined the possibility, but things had been pressed too far for too long, and she knew she had no other choice, even if that meant she was damned for doing it. She hoped it would not be much longer. She didn't know if she would be able to steal her resolve or staving off the anxiety as the passage of minutes continued on. Time was, as always, a bitch. Another car pulled into the parking lot, creaking through the ice and snow which had drifted across the pavement. Even through the closed windows of her car, she could hear the crunching as the thick treads of the vehicle overpowered the frozen water. Was it him? She tried to look surreptitiously, but the windows of the other car were tinted and she couldn't see well enough through them. She waited, pulling her purse closer to her chest from her lap. She could see movement in the other car through the tinting. It was subtle, but it was there as far as she could tell, and it was only one person in it. And that suited her. She only wanted one person, and Any more would be nothing but trouble she couldn't handle. She unzipped her purse, exposing the contents to the air. She reached in without looking and pulled out the gun. It was cold in her hand, even with the heater in the car going on full blast, making the interior of the car hot and steamy. As she held it tightly by the grip, she could sense a subtle vibration in it, an ache of the deadly mechanism as it held itself back, barely, from firing on its own. She knew from practice how quick the trigger on this gun could be, and she was ready for it all to be over. She kept her finger off the trigger, but pointed it in a way that she could instantly bring its firepower to bear. She heard the other car door click as the person inside opened it to step out. She gripped the gun even tighter and put her free hand to the handle of her own door, ready to spring out in a heartbeat. She held her gaze tightly on the other car. The door swung wide, and she saw the figure of a man stepping out. He was dressed in a dark pair of pants and a black duster, extending the length of his torso to the midpoint of his legs, covering it all against the bracing cold. It was him. She was sure of it, though he wore the collar of his coat high, hiding the bottom half of his face, and the sunglasses he wore blocked the view of his eyes from her sight. She was sure it was him. It was his bearing, the way he carried himself. It was unmistakable. She slipped her hand inside of her own coat, hiding the gun from sight, and then pulled the lever on her door, swinging it wide open. She stepped out as the man was readying himself to turn to walk toward the building nearby, and as she stepped out, he heard the sound and turned back again, facing her fully. Did he recognize her? She dreamed he would, as she had planned all this out, but as she stepped 1 foot closer to him, she saw his face remain passive. How could he not recognize her after all he had done? After all the hell she had been through, how could he just gaze at her as if she were nothing more than a stranger in the street? It pushed her anger even further, and she crossed the distance between them in a few steps, wrenching the gun from her coat and bringing it to bear. Did he recognize her now? She saw his eyebrows flare upward, and even as the trigger was pulled. The shot rang out loudly, deafening her for a moment as the bullet entered his chest just slightly off-center. The dark coat hid any sign of blood from the wound, but he staggered backward a few steps, gasping and crying out, though she was not able to hear it. He crumpled to the ground, falling to his back, and she saw the dirty snow was further marked by tinges of red as the blood swiftly poured from his back, evidence the shot had torn its way through his body. All traces of her anger toward him dissipated with the flow of the blood, replaced by a deep calm and satisfaction, knowing no one else would have to go through what she had at his hands. She watched as he gasped for air once, twice, and then a long exhale burst forth from his lungs, spreading the vapor from his heat into the cold. Not a word was said by either of them by the time that his last gleam of life faded away. She waited a moment more, knowing someone inside the building had probably heard the shot and already called the police. She watched for any movement from him, some trick he was pulling on her to get her to lower her guard, but the only movement was a slight twitching in his left foot. She held the gun stiff in front of her, aiming for his head, and then kicked out at his face to move the sunglasses. She wanted to see the look on his eyes before she was done. They skittered away across the icy pavement, sliding to a stop a few feet away from her car. She heard it, but she didn't pay any attention to where they landed. Instead, she was struck by the realization the man laying at her feet was not the one she thought he was. He was a complete stranger, and his dead eyes were locked on her own, piercing her through to the core. Crushing despair racked her instantly as the desperate look in his gaze became a part of her. It had been so simple. How could this have happened? What have I done? She backed away a step, and then two, keeping her eyes on his own. All the tragedy her life had endured had come down to this singular moment, and she had somehow become the monster she had fought her whole life. She took another step back, and she felt something crunch beneath her foot, a plastic snap and a tinkle of glass. She didn't look at it. She couldn't pull her eyes away from the man laying in the snow. The nightmare of her life was complete. Another step back, and she felt the idling car she had driven for over an hour to come to this place. The vibration entered her, and she finally was able to close her eyes, even if it was for only a moment. She reached her free hand back and felt the metal of the car behind her and used it to steady herself a little as she tried fruitlessly to come to terms with what she had done. She opened her eyes again and met those of the man she had killed. That poor innocent man who had just happened to be at the wrong place at the wrong time watched her own movements with his leaded eyes, waiting for her next play. Coherent thought was gone from her as the gun raised upward and she felt the cold of it against her temple. Will he laugh when he hears the news? She was gone before the sound of the shot entered her ears. So there you guys go. His Eyes, and a very weird one. Again, that one, the weirdness of it, it started off because of a trip that my wife and I made to the grocery store. I was sitting out in the car waiting and had my free ride in my hands at that moment in time and kind of, wanted to write a little something. So that came out of it. A little bit weird, but I like how it came out. I've got one more for you guys here before we leave tonight, and I love how this one came out. This one is one of my favorites, and from what I've heard, a lot of people out there have really enjoyed it as well, so I thought I would do it again. This is What Have I Done? And I love this story. I really do. This one started off, just for the giggles of it all here, this one started off by the phrase, "What have I done?" repeating over and over in my head, and I had to write it out. And this is the story basically that expanded from that little phrase. What Have I Done? By Ira Robinson. Do you realize what you have done? Those words haunt me. Taunts me in my sleep, my every waking moment. I hear them echoing down the corridors as I walk, calling me from every alleyway I pass. I cannot get away from them. I cannot hide from them. They encircle me and enfold me, and before them I am powerless to do more than run away, the guilt biting at my heels. But the words have no more meaning to me than my name, no more meaning to me than the strangers' faces I pass every step of the way. I'm a man apart, a man forsaken, and I don't even understand why. Do you realize what you have done? No. How can I? I don't even know who I am. I know I'm a haunted man. I know the signs and wonders I could claim to do with a mere thought in my younger days have ceased, and that I'm perhaps nothing more now than a cackling idiot in a rest home, awaiting my next change and turn to the sunlight. I don't know for sure, you see, because I think I left my sanity somewhere in the streets that are silent now, and perhaps all that I see is nothing more than mere flights of fancy in my eyes. I see people around me as I walk these streets, these desolate avenues that carry no more commerce than the dust that flies in the wind, dust that will be bought and sold by merchants of passion and glory that we all thought we could have been. But no longer can we claim to be victorious and virtuous. We're more like vacuous and drooling, babbling to each other, those who are left, about the days gone by and wondering if mankind will ever survive. I'm confused and lost within my own mind. I'm unsure of where to walk to next. Each street I pass by, each house an empty shell, and there seems nowhere left to go to find a breath of solace in this desiccated and fried world I've been left on. Perhaps I'll just sit and wait for the moment of blessed release and sit and be comfortable in the shade with my hat pulled down and my cigarette in my hand unlit, waiting for someone to come by with a match. Do you realize what you've done? I can't face what I've done, I think, because what I've done is more than I can bear. The people I pass by, all these faces of strangers to me, I mean, how can they leer at me so accusingly? How can they claim with their voiceless blame that I'm the one to do this to them? Children gather around me and throw stones, and always I think they'll be the next killing blow. Always I think that this time they will hit. This time they'll free me from the endless stream of accusations and lies, but they always miss. They throw the biggest they can grasp their dirty fingers around and fling them with all their little might, but they can never hit. Isn't that proof of my innocence? Isn't that enough for them? innocence. Innocence is nothing more than a viewpoint. Everybody's guilty of something sometime. No one can claim they have no blame. No, not even I, who cannot even think straight. Maybe that's the proof of my guilt. But guilty of what? No, I don't realize, and I don't want to listen anymore. So I walk on. I abandon my hopes of a murky shadow in a corner to hide my face, to keep me away from what has become an endless stream of wake, walk, sleep, wake. The streets are growing dark now, and I know that night approaches. And yet another night with no answers, and a day filled with the gleeful chittering of children mocking me as I walk. The night brings with it its own horrors now. Now that... What? Now that things have changed in the world? Now that the world has passed through the strange travails that beset it for so long? Now that the way of life we were always so proud of, so set to protect, and so desperate to hold on to is gone the way of the dodo into eternal night. Yeah, that was a bad time. I remember now, not many survived those days. They seemed so long ago, and I guess they must be, given the state of decay I see around me now, but it seems such a short time ago. It seems like only yesterday, really, when I did what I did. Do you realize what you've done? Perhaps I do a little. I remember a little that the night does seem to bring its own answers to questions I would rather be left unasked. Nightfall, and with it comes the sound of insects skittering out around the deserted streets. Insects grown larger because of the largesse they've found in the corpses that have been left behind. Corpses left to lie, unburied, unknown, and unmourned. How many? An amazing amount, given the way the world passed through its trouble, given the way that I saw it all happen from that control room so long ago. Voices calling out the orders, calling out the time and the levels and the strange symbolism grasped in the mathematics that were required to push us away from that horror that awaited us. Voices calling out for the buttons to be pushed, the levels to rise, the power to flow, and then the final button, the final solution intended to save us all from the fate that we had been sealed with. The last hope. The last clarion call of heroics and the indomitable will of the human spirit, and that final button laying under my hands, ready to be pressed, begging for the pressure of my hand to complete its destiny, to become what it had been intended to be since its manufacture, an object in motion. Much like this world that I now stand upon, this world of terrible agony and deep sorrow and regret, yes, great regret at the fact that we had no choice. And in the end, that it made no difference whatsoever to the fate of mankind. Yes, the night brings answers with it as I look into the sky and I see nothing but blackness, no stars twinkling in their beautiful mystery. No more guiding lights to bring the sailors home, no more light of the moon to make lovers weep. No more lovers. And the voices calling from the chambers of the earth, calling from the valleys and the hills, crying out in agony, calling out in one loud voice to me, saying, "Do you realize what you have done?" But they don't know, nor will they ever, in their sad and untimely change of bodies and their endless scream, that I had no choice in what I did. Yeah, I remember it clearly now, as clear as the black night that's come across me once again on this walk of mine. The dark star, the black death that was edging its way closer and closer to us and assuring the destruction of all of us, the instantaneous burst of desolation that was sure to happen. It had come as a shock to us all, those of us who were in the know, as we used to claim, those who had a stake and a chance to perhaps save us one more time from the unknown. And they called me in, they briefed me on what was to come, showed me the trajectory of that black death coming to us, and I saw in only a moment's time that it would not miss, that it was going to happen, and there'd be nothing we could do to make it go away, nothing we could do to make it shift into another path and save us all. Still, there was a chance. There always is a chance when the human spirit is involved. When that monstrous and powerful will is put to the task of ensuring its survival. And so the plan was hatched. The plan. What a mighty and horrific word that could be. A blessing and a curse at the same time when it's placed in the hand of the good and the bad. Which were we, I wonder? Which would the infinite deem us worthy of? A place among those who valiantly tried, or those fools who did not listen to reason? A little of both, I think. A little of both was in us all on that day in the brightly lit, endlessly loud control room. The voices calling out, screaming orders, shouting percentages and figures, and one voice calling above them all, one voice calling out, "Do you realize what you have done?" That there was a problem, and to stop the countdown, stop the... But that mechanical part, that wonderful machine that was my body, already moving forward, already pressing ahead in its motion to complete its destiny, to do what it had been born to do, to move. The button underneath had no chance. It was mashed into itself, pressed into itself, turned into that position that would make it all come to life. Come to life, go to death. No difference in the end, no change in status, no deliverance from the darkness, just a flash of light and the voices calling out and calling out and calling out, echoing throughout my brain. What have you done? Answers to questions better left unasked come in the night indeed, and I know I'm helpless before the onslaught of memory and dream, memory and reality, and memory and what is the now broken remains of this endlessly desolate, destroyed planet of ours. Did we shift? Did we sidestep into that separate reality the way we thought we would? The way the insane amount of mathematics and physics showed that we should? Did we avert one disaster only to cause another? The answer to that is simple. Simple because I simply have to look up to find that question blatantly answered loud and clear. Yeah, a shift did happen. But to where we thought we would end up? No. To another, perhaps 1 or 2 steps away. So tiny in the sight of man, so small on the scale of what we had accomplished over the millennia that we had been around, and yet large enough by far on the quantum scale to send us far, far into a reality that should not be. How many days have I wandered now? How many times have I walked these streets, the faces surrounding me, the ghosts of what we had been, what we were, and what we were to become, all of them at once calling out to me, blaming me, accusing me of my heinous crime against them all. I'm a guilty man, marked with the blood of an entire species. No, more than that, an entire planet. All life, everything changed in that one moment, that one infinitely long second when that simple finger of a man created it all. Ghosts, voices. Do you realize what you have done? Yes, in the end, I do know what I've done. Perhaps with the light of day tomorrow I can forget, even for the moment, an infinite moment, finger in the air above the button when one man created it all. I know what I've done. So there you guys go. What have I done? It's a very interesting story, I think. I liked the way that it came out. A lot of things, in that are a little bit weird and a little bit strange, but that's okay. I still like the way that it came out. So if you guys enjoyed this show, make sure you guys hit that subscribe button over there on YouTube so that you can get notified of when we put out a new show or when we go live with something else. It might be live later on tonight. I'm not sure yet. We'll see what ends up happening here in the next couple hours. Yeah. If you want to go to the archive of this show, it's going to be over at our website, openeyesnetwork.com. And make sure you guys go over there and check out the author that I had on earlier tonight, Brittany Armitage. Really great author, really cool lady, and hopefully you guys enjoyed it and got a lot out of it, just like I did. Next week, I have Kirsten McKenzie coming on, another great author, and hopefully you guys will tune in for that. It's going to be on Friday at 7 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, so make sure you guys come on back for that. If you guys are over there at lnmradionetwork.com, make sure you guys hit that subscribe button and help to keep us on the air. We are listener supported, as you guys know, and we need your help to stay alive, to say the least. Anyways, if you want to send me an email, you can send it to feedback@openeyesnetwork.com. And if you want to meet us on social media, we're everywhere. OpenEyesNetwork.com on all of the different social media platforms. And if you want to check out my own writing site, don't forget my author pages and everything are over there at my website, originalworlds.com. I will be back again on Sunday, 8 o'clock p.m. Eastern Standard Time at lnmradionetwork.com for Money and Change and the Positude Podcast. So make sure you guys tune in for that as well. Until next time, keep safe out there, have fun, and thank you so much as always for listening. We'll talk to you again soon.